Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager number BB1278, 4.5 by 4.5, US10B right hand. What is that? It's a fairly uncommon hinge. And as you look at it, you might start to say to yourself, yeah, that's an uncommon hinge, because it just doesn't look like a normal hinge. And specifically, of course, we're talking about not this leaf, but this leaf. This leaf does not have countersunk holes for screws. What it does have is a hole that has been tapped. This hinge, a BB1278, yeah, it's tapped. You can't see it on the camera. I had to take a closer stare at it, but those holes are definitely tapped. This is called a slip-in hinge, is what it is. And if you're looking at this, you might say to yourself that this is absolutely a slip-in hinge. And it is the bottom line. This is one leaf. This is a slip-in hinge, one leaf only. If it was a two-leaf, the other leaf would be only drilled and tapped as well. And we'll take some dimensional properties and we'll talk about where you use this. This is a 4.5 by 4.5. That means that the height of the hinge is 4.5 inch tall. That's the first dimension. The second dimension is the width. It's 4.5 inch wide. I suppose you can get by not knowing that the height is always the first dimension on a hinge when you're dealing with a square hinge. But you might want to know it if you're dealing with a 6 by 5 or an 8 by 6 or a 3.5 by 6 or a 5 by 12. It's important to know which of those dimensions is this one first. And when it comes to hinges, the height is the first dimension. This will include a fastener package. You always want to tell the factory what you need, and an easy way to do that is to indicate in the comment field what the composition is of the door and frame. Fasteners that came with this without us specifying is all machine screw and half wood screw. So as long as we have one of the two leaves as machine, we're okay. A slip-in hinge is usually going to be just aluminum storefront, so you'll need all machine screws. But there'd be nothing that would keep you from using a wood door in a slip-in hinge application. You get 8 machine screws and 4 wood screws. If you have, believe it or not, I have seen a slip-in hinge in a wood frame application. I don't recall how that was fastened, but it was wood. Very odd. It was just a veneer over those hinge pockets. And the reason they did that was, I think, just for a design aesthetic. It was a year or two ago, and I just don't recall the particulars, but I remember saying to myself, that is extremely odd, what I just saw. So the point is define in the comment field what you need, because you might find that you need all wood screws. Very unlikely, but it's going to be awfully hard to get a matching finish 12 by 1 1/4 threaded to the head flathead wood screw on a Saturday morning. Let's talk about where you're going to use this BB1278. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Now, these hinges are obviously still made. This order just came in. What I'm unaware of still being made are aluminum storefront applications that would call out in new construction a slip-in hinge. So very likely that this hinge is going to go into an application where the door and frame are several decades old, maybe mid-20th century. So the term slip-in means this. You'll have the door or the frame or both that will have nothing other than a slot cut in the face of the door or the frame. That slip-in hinge literally will then slide into that slot that's been cut. The door or the frame will then have in the edge, or in the style of the door, the edge of the door, or the rabbet of the frame, simply holes that have been drilled and countersunk. You're literally using the vertical structural part of the door or the frame as the reinforcement. I've got to say that it's probably a good way to hang the door from the perspective that, well, I've never heard anyone tell me that the frame failed. You know, the reinforcement broke, the door reinforcement broke, and customers that have ordered these are, in my experience, the last 10 years, they're always for doors and frames that were installed decades ago, and the door and frame didn't wear out. The prep didn't wear out. The fact that you've got the jamb with a slot cut in it slid in and then held in with screws through the rabbet, that didn't wear out. It's the hinge that wore out. So something tells me that that idea, that design, is probably not awful. And I would possibly think that it might even be superior to a reinforcement that's been added, a hinge plate that's been added behind the jamb or inside the door that is then mechanically fastened. Those oftentimes break. Those oftentimes come loose. You're not going to do new construction, I don't really believe. It'd be quite unheard of to do a slip-in. At least I've not seen it. Every time I've seen it, it's mid 20th century construction. But there must have been something to it. Why it was phased out or gone away from, I don't know. I couldn't say. It would seem to me that it shouldn't be any more or less difficult. It just must have been maybe a problem with getting the hardware. Maybe hinge manufacturers no longer would sell them for the same price as any other hinge and then quadrupled the price because it took more work to make slip-in hinges, specialty type hinge. That could be it. Pure speculation. Now, why would that be the case? Well, what you might also notice is the gap between these two leaves is noticeably larger than it would be on a full mortise hinge. If this was a full mortise hinge, this is a full mortise hinge, but if this was a both leaves swagged full mortise hinge, that gap would be a 1/16 of an inch, not what this is, which is, I believe, 3/16. I'm quite sure it is. The reason that is like that is because you can't have a standard swagging on both of the leaves. The leaf that's going to go into the jamb, this one, where my pinky is moving, where my tip of my finger is, that's got a much flatter bend. It's not completely flat, but it's almost flat. If this was a full surface hinge, that leaf here would be flush with the bottom of the barrel. It's not, but it's closer to the bottom of the barrel than the standard swagged leaf is, as seen here. And there is an image that we'll look at in a moment that shows the bend on those leaves. And in fact, it's the way that the hinge leaf is bent that I like to say literally creates the genetic code of the hinge. As you change that bend, you are literally changing the hinge type, whether it be full surface, full mortise, half surface, half mortise, raised barrel, swing, clear, not necessarily wide throw, but any combination of all that stuff. As you change that bend, you're really changing the orientation of the vertical axis of pivoting, that imaginary line, to its relationship to the door and frame. As you bend the hinge leaves, that's going to change. What's also going to change is the orientation, the location, the positioning of the hinge leaf in relationship to that vertical axis of pivoting. You're not going to attach that hinge into a recessed pocket in the rabbet, even though it's going to reside in that same space. But the inherent difference is you need to change the bend on the slip-in leaf because you now need to account for more material between the edge of the door and the frame than just the 1/16 of an inch. You got to flatten that bend out because the thickness of the jamb has to be incorporated into it as well. And the logic would be sound if you thought of a both leaves swagged application, that this margin would be even greater. And if you concluded that, you'd be absolutely right. That margin goes from 3/16 to 5/16. That additional 1/8 of an inch accounts for the thickness of the other component, the door or the frame. By the way, this is an US10B. This is a steel-based hinge, and it's in an oil-rubbed bronze finish. This is a ball bearing BB. We know it's a standard weight hinge because it has 2 bearing packets. I've never seen a heavyweight slip-in hinge. They may only do these in a standard commercial weight or a standard weight, which on a 4.5 tall is 134 thousandths. My caliper's telling me it's spot on, 134 thousandths. Not that it really matters, but it's very unusual to see a hinge leaf exactly right on. And I will also add that the fit and finish on this hinge, made in early 2022, there is a stamp on there. I'm going to go with the date. This looks great. And I will just be painfully honest. Not every hinge I see from Hager is great. It just isn't. And what I mean is, I'll see machine runoff at the edge of the leaves. I'll see inconsistency when I measure the leaves. I will see a finish that is worthy of being rejected, specifically with the oil rubbed finishes and in the crotch here of the leaf where it meets the barrel. It's hard to get your equipment in there to finish that. This is a great example. And while I don't love this US10B, it's leaning towards US10A. It's not bad. I mean, it's good, really good. So good for you, Hager. And I say that because they have recently been undergoing for probably 2 years substantial distribution center improvements, as in, according to them, if I'm not quoting them incorrectly, they've built a state-of-the-art distribution center. Well, they may have improved their manufacturing because that's a pretty clean-looking hinge. Let's switch to the screen view and let's look at all the supporting documentation. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. All right, here is the item that we are looking at. BB1278, 4.5, 4.5 aluminum entrance hinge. It's made of steel. It happens to be for aluminum storefronts or aluminum entrances. One leaf tapped, full mortise, standard weight ball bearing steel base. Extended description information down here. Swag is indeed 3/16. It's a handed hinge. We'll take a look at that in a moment. Steel hinge, steel pin, 134 thousandths, which means it's standard weight. 5-knuckle ball bearing is also part of the BB1278 part number as well. This part number means multiple things. It means one leaf swagged. It means it's 5-knuckle. It means it's standard weight. It means it is a ball bearing hinge. Button tip and plug, we'll show you that in a moment. Well, actually, the tip that's on here, you can do decorative tips. It would be, I've never done a slip-in hinge with a ball tip or a steeple tip. You could. The typical tips on hinge pins are called button tip because if you look at the button on your coat, it kind of looks like that. Template, I think this template is wrong. No, it's not. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this is the wrong template. This is the BB1277 template. And I know that because I see the swag here is 5/16. That's both leaves tapped. So let's take a dive into the Hager world. BB1278 template, Hager. And we'll have that corrected by the time you're seeing this video. Yeah, here's the template. Shows you the location of all the holes. Shows you the 3/16 swag between the leaves. If you use your imagination, you can see how this relationship is changing, and it has definitely changed as a result of that. Now, what is changing here is how much this leaf is bent in relationship to this leaf. That's the bottom line. Right hand shown, left hand opposite. Yeah, I'd go with this being a right hand, assuming that the slip-in leaf is going into the frame, into the jamb, which in my experience is where you're always going to see it. Almost always. I believe that I had a client order a slip-in where it was going into the door but not the frame. And the bottom line is this is handed, and we'll go over that in a moment. Table down below showing what the F dimension is, which is just the length of the leaf, depending on whether it's 4-inch wide or 4.5-inch wide. They can do it in a plain bearing hinge. They can do it in a ball bearing hinge. They can do it in that's probably a 3-knuckle hinge, an AB7011. They can do it in a stainless or brass base material as well. And these are the part numbers. So if you wanted this same oil rub bronze, you can do it in a bronze base material. Now let's look at the product catalog. This is handy because it will show you the other part numbers for this same hinge. So both leaves swagged, both leaves slip in 5/16. The hinge we're working on, non-ferrous, both leaves for slip in, non-ferrous 1 leaf slip in. On this column, plain bearing versions. I would see no reason why you would buy that other than economy. Now, let's look at some images that we have. There's the label on the box. There's the hinge itself. Okay. I took that image as well. That's a little darker. None of these pictures have an accurate color representation, but this is a little bit warmer. Close-up view, showing how clean that is. It's finished. I've said anyway. That's that drilled and tapped hole, the Hager logo. That's showing the swag on the hinge leaf and how they're different. I mean, it may be impossible to notice it because you're really trying to notice a very small dimension with your eyes. The backside. Then the screw package. That's there. Now, there is a link below this video here. And when you click on that, you'll be able to pull up not only all of the Hager products we sell by means of this horizontal navigation as seen here, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you are interested in the name Hager at all, you'll probably want to check that out because it's 651 pages of everything Hager related. It's quite a bit of material there, and the cover page of this older catalog kind of says it all in terms of what they sell. And if you notice these different product groups that are there, everything's there except the door and frame, basically. Hinges, continuous aluminum geared hinges, pin and barrel hinges, commercial hinges, trim and auxiliary, exits, low energy operators, sliding door hardware, European material, residential hinges, gasketing, closers, lock sets. It's all there. Everything but the door and frame. Also, if you want to dive deeper into the world of Hager, they have their own keying platform, their own keyway, their own system. That manual is here. If you're a locksmith, you've probably encountered the Hager H1 keyway, or if you're someone that deals in Hager and locks, you may encounter the H1 keyway sooner or later. This is the manual for their system, and this is me blabbing on about it. And then for fun, the last thing I'll point out to you will be a Hager catalog from 107 years ago. If you want to see what Hager was making in 1915, this would be your document. There would be the cover page of that catalog. I spend a little bit of time doing research looking for hardware catalogs of folks that manufacture or manufactured builders hardware, and I collect them, we scan them, and we upload them because it is kind of nice to see, take a trip back in time, so to speak. And and I can tell you this, that there are still several people with the last name Hager that work in the Hager company. I believe they're 5th generation. To me, I would think that they'd probably be closer to 7th generation, considering the fact that Hager goes back to basically right at the Civil War. So that's 100, right before the Civil War, as far as I know. About a 170-year-old company. I just went to page 25. It took me all that time to load that, so if you play around in this catalog, you'll need to be exceptionally patient or save it to your desktop because it is an epic file, that's for sure. I don't know if I can see properties here of the file size. Maybe under inspect. We won't play with that right now. I could go to where... Anyway, let's wrap up this video on camera. If you've made it this far into this video, you must be determined to see it through to the end, and we appreciate your hanging in there with us and watching this entire video. It means a lot. It takes a lot of work to create these videos in the sense that, it's time taken away from doing other things. However, the advantage for me personally of creating these videos is the fact that it does allow myself to either learn about something new, to reacquaint myself with something, or to reinforce what I believe that I already know. Any comments that you might leave down below would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so if you have any questions on the Hager BB1278, 4.5 by 4.5 and 10B, or any finish actually, it'd be a steel-based finish code. That would be more accurately called 640 or 640 finish, because that tells us it's oil rubbed, but also tells us the base material is steel, whereas US10B, a system that's about 90 years old, doesn't tell us the base material. If you say 10B, I know you mean oil rubbed, but I don't know what it means. You could have a factory using US10B and it's some sort of painted plastic or zinc. The US system doesn't tell us base material, whereas the BHMA system does. It's a 3 numerical value code. So 640 is steel-based oil rubbed, 613 is bronze-based oil rubbed. Anyway, fun fact. Any questions on this or anything Hager related, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you. Thanks to our clients, Architectural Builder Supply is building an additional facility, and what follows is not only a look at the acreage that we're building the facility on, but also first the architectural renderings as they exist, or at least the architectural plans as they exist at this time. Thank you very much. Let's take a look. All right, let's take a look at the architecturals as they exist at this moment, or at least it wouldn't be proper to call these architecturals, but it would be proper to call them renderings in the sense of they're conceptual drawings, they're not renderings. So the entire space is going to look like this in terms of a site rendering. This will be a 22,000 square foot building, of which will have specific purpose areas. There'll be a workshop down here. This is a few thousand square feet that will be likely woodworking, metalworking, CNC, things of that nature. This will be an office area here, a private office area. This will be Architectural Builders Supply expanded storage area where we will be able to do fulfillment. The entire space in the center is going to be all of the volume, as I call it. Large components will be able to be stored and stocked there. Machinery that's too large to fit otherwise may be put out here. Specific facility rooms, and then some recreation over here. Let's take a look at that drone footage, and thank you very much for taking a look.